Welcome to our official album review for Lil Yachty and James Blake's new collaborative album, Bad Cameo. When this got announced, people were super excited because Yachty was coming off of a strong year in 2023, and he had kind of gone into an alternative route with his album, Let's Start Here. So people were asking the question, what would a collab album sound like with James Blake? And that's what we're going to be reviewing today, is their new collab album, Bad Cameo. And by the way, we listened to the entire album with our Patreon community, so if you want to catch the full live album reaction, it's available on the reaction tier on Patreon. Check the pinned comment. But Lou, let's get into this. Let's start off with the artist performance because, talking about James Blake, talking about Lil Yachty, two completely different artists in their own regard, two completely different catalogs, two completely different production styles when it comes to what you hear in their music. So how do you feel about the chemistry on this album? Because I feel like that's a big talking point within this new collab tape.
Yeah, well, I think at first glance, it's cool to see Lil Yachty go into this area just because we saw with Let's Start Here that he's down to go into psychedelic rock and new genres, and he has that desire to experiment, and that's something that James Blake has always done, going into electronic music, looking at the indie rock music that he's made. Like, he's always been all over the place. So I feel like it's cool to get, two left field artists, you could say, at the helm of one project together. And of course, the chemistry is the most important part of the performance, right? It's a collab album. You want to see how well are they going to complement each other. And I think there's definitely mismatches in terms of production, in terms of who's sounding good on which beats. For example, you look at a song like Woo, the production is very fitting for Lil Yachty because you have these fast-paced drill-esque drums, remind you of some Jersey Club stuff as well. And while that's cool for like Yachty's typical trap flows, James Blake doesn't really fit that much on a production like that.
I also feel like that's maybe a bit of a similar situation with something like a Missing Man, for example, where like I enjoyed the track as a whole and it's been growing on me, but
That's a great song for me.
I enjoy it and I like the collaboration, but off of first listen, I'm like, yeah, do they really go well together here? And then after a couple of more listens, I did really enjoy it, and I feel like it was maybe a situation where I had a similar sentiment to you off of Woo, but then I was able to grow into the song with repeated listens. So I really like that performance because you're having Yachty on the first verse come through, super contagious harmonies, and then after that, Yachty and James Blake both share the chorus. So I feel like that was a great display of chemistry as far as that goes, and that's a track that grew on me. But let's talk about Bad Cameo, which is the self-titled track off of the album. It's also the midway point of the album, and I feel like this is low-key one of the best songs off of the album, just displaying like both artists' talents. You have, Lil Yachty and James Blake again starting off the first verse.
They only have one verse.
It's kind of like a combined verse, at least to start off the song. So how do you feel like they matched vocally within this sort of section of the song? And how do you feel as a whole, Lil Yachty did in comparison to, let's say, James Blake did? Because obviously James Blake is a better vocalist than Yachty, and in certain situations, maybe it was a carry job. So, yes, I'm just asking, like, how did you feel about maybe this song and the rest of them as far as vocally?
Yeah, Bad Cameo is definitely the best example and display of their chemistry on here. It feels like since they're both using that atmospheric reverb and the fact that you're getting their vocals overlapping and that they're sharing one verse together, this was definitely the song that felt the most like a duet to me. So this is definitely a big highlight on the track list. And then when it comes to, Yachty and James Blake, of course, there is a gap there in between like their singing ability. And obviously you're getting some rapping performances from Lil Yachty, but for the most part, he's coming in, he's auto-crooning, he's using vocal effects similar to what he did in Poland, where you have this sort of, I would say, distorted vibrating vocal effect that he's trying to use. And it works sometimes, it has the wobbly effect. And I just think that ultimately there's certain songs like the intro, which I believe is called Save the Savior, where you really hear the gap in between their performances. And it just seems like for certain portions of this, like James Blake is the standout performer.
I agree with you, especially on that one. Like, you were able to tell right away. But I think it's more of like when Yachty's in his rapping bag in comparison to when then you're getting just straight like James Blake harmonies right after it. I feel like they're both doing well when they're maybe taking a bit more of a minimalistic approach on a song. So for example, I feel like In Gray, which is the song right after, that was kind of a stronger cut off of the album as well, because you're getting, the intro by Lil Yachty, and then after that you get verse 2 and verse 3 from Blake, and then Yachty carries out the outro. So I feel like when there was more like song structure, at least within certain tracks, it made more sense for me as far as chemistry goes. And that was a performance where I was like, oh, you know what? Their vocals are definitely not on par, but I could see where James Blake and Yachty kind of come together in one workflow. But overall, I think, listen, James Blake definitely had the better performance. It's kind of normal, though, in my opinion. I feel like this is
To be expected.
It's a new territory for Yachty. You know, it's only his second studio album, kind of going into more of like an alternative route. Not only that, but the production is completely different in comparison to Let's Start Here. So this is also new territory for Yachty. So I'm going to say it was good. It was a good artist performance. I feel like maybe if it was only James Blake on top of these productions, I could have gone great with it. But you know what? Yachty did his thing, and it was just a good performance overall.
Absolutely, yeah, definitely a good performance, and they both played into just the experimental nature of the album with just how trippy and how manipulated the vocals are. And I love what James Blake really did here, just because you have certain, moments where he's pitching up his vocals on a song like the outro, which is called, let me see here, Red something.
Red Carpet.
Red Carpet, yeah. So I love how angelic he can sound on that, but yet sound so haunting and have these powerful, long, extended vocal notes on the intro track. So he was really the standout performer, like you said, but overall a good performance from them both. Chemistry on some tracks. Next up, let's go into the content of this album. And I think it's pretty straightforward. A lot of the themes are love-centric. They're going into a lot of heartbreak. They're going into also just
navigating through heartbreak, but also trying to find optimism and maybe new hope for, let's say, what's in store for them romantically in their life.
And I even love a song like Missing Man in terms of the writing, just because they're going through like battling this identity crisis and even talking about their personal failures. Like, for example, Yachty is having a hard time coming to the realization that he's maybe putting his family in stressful situations, that he's a bit selfish with his time. And then you have James Blake feeling frustrated with himself for not following through on the things that he wanted to follow through on. So
yeah, you're also getting some personal writing on Bad Cameo as well. It's a very simplistic verse, but it's actually a powerful one for the album, in my opinion. It feels like there's like a bit of like a resentment toward, with Lil Yachty and James Blake. And if you go through the lyrics, it says, feel it flowing through my veins and blood, feel it flowing through my veins and blood. And what's interesting there is that you feel like it gets intense with the writing. And then, it kind of feels like they're talking to a lover that's on the brink, right? Asking, in due time will be fine. I'm tired of the fire. I would never question your teaching. So I don't know, like, how to interpret certain, like, let's say, writing pieces off of this album.
I think that one was about them, like, just experiencing, like, loneliness. That was sort of the message that I picked up on that.
Where did you get the loneliness part out of this?
Let me go back to the lyrics.
Because you have the little section in the middle of the verse where it says, did you ever love me? Did you ever love me? In due time, we'll be fine.
Yeah, we'd all be lonely, lost, and like me if everyone would behave just like me. It's a nightmare. Life's a nightmare. So, yeah,
I guess
definitely about that.
Yeah, but I could also see how they're talking to maybe a lover with the whole section of like, did you ever love me in that situation? And in due time, we'll be fine. So that was an interesting verse for me off of the album itself.
I found this a bit ironic. On the song Save the Savior, James Blake has a line that says, my back is broken by the end of the day from carrying you. Not some, but all of the way. And it's just funny how it's sort of like related to the album, but not entirely. Like Yachty does have a lot of standout moments throughout it.
Some funny lines and quotables from Yachty as well. I feel like this was kind of poor writing, but whatever is on Save the Savior, the way that he opens up the album. I told my agent I want to be treated just like a slut. Pay me directly after.
Another one. I'm trying to teleport hoes to the ends. That was pretty funny.
That was good.
Also, you also have some cringe ones, like sometimes I wish you had connections with Santa. I wish you could hop on a sleigh and come straight down my pole. Yeah.
But regardless, though, I mean, it's pretty straightforward throughout the entire album, and for the most part, the writing is concise, the theme is concise, and it's kind of surface level overall, but it was well executed upon by both artists. So
I'll give it good subject matter. Yeah,
it is. It's good
I
subject
feel
matter.
like they definitely get introspective at times, even if the writing is very bare bones, simplistic. But let's keep on going. The production. This is easily the best aspect of the album.
Oh, absolutely.
Production.
It's gonna be the highest score as well, just to warn you guys now. And I think that I didn't know what to expect with the production, right? Because after Let's Start Here, I didn't expect that. And with the new James Blake studio album experience, it's always going to be a new mixed bag, and you're going to get so many different types of production styles.
But what's impressive is that James Blake and Lil Yachty are at the helm of it. They produced
Absolutely.
nearly every song on here with the help of Dom Maker, who was prominent, and also Benny X and Sad Pony.
So
Yeah.
it was very concise as far as production goes, and that's what I like about the soundscape. There's like this spacey, ethereal, sort of like synth-esque alternative sound that's going on within the project that I feel like is executed upon from song to song in a beautiful fashion. The only problem that I have with the production is on certain aspects, like you were talking about with Woo, for example. Like those trap drums and like that sort of like, I don't even know if it's trap drums or it sounds like more of like a Jersey Club-esque like drum pattern. It just doesn't make sense for like the entire album. And I feel like at certain points there was productions that didn't necessarily fit in comparison to others, that I feel like maybe like the drums could have been slowed down or they could have taken a different approach as a whole with the
Yeah, because
production.
James Blake has like a slower and more sentimental singing style. So like on a song like Woo, you could see that he's trying to like pick up and match the tempo, but he's having a hard time to do it. So that felt a bit forced, where it's like, okay,
It just creates for awkward spaces within the
well,
records.
yeah, I think that was probably a case of like Yachty being like, okay, like I want a couple of songs with this like BPM, and like James Blake tried to find his way through and navigate. But yeah, like you said, very ethereal, dreamy production, a lot of slow burning instrumentals on here, a lot of progressive beats, and that's my favorite aspect of this. When you go on a song like In Gray, where you have this very mellow ambient instrumental that's made up of just a myriad of synths and keys, and then you get the same synth chords in the second half, just played at a faster rate, and eventually you get church bells rattling, snares as well. So I love just the journey that some of these productions can really take you on. Another highlight for me was on Midnight, which was absolutely mesmerizing. It sounds like you're ascending into the sky, and yeah, just beautiful track altogether. Apart from that, what did you think of something like Missing Man that had some orchestral elements too, some violins ringing through?
I liked it. I think it was enjoyable. I feel like it was a nice break for the track list because, like you had said, you had got a lot more of like atmospheric as production on In Gray and Midnight. Then with Woo, it was a bit more fast paced, and I feel like a Missing Man type of production maybe like evened out the playing field for me, as far as like a totality goes. And I like the drums and the percussions on this song as well. I feel like keeps you engaged all the way through. Another production standout for me is Running Away from the Rabbit, or Run Away from the Rabbit, should I say. I just love how the production is sort of structured on this. I love the synth work on this song as well, and I think that it's a standout for me as far as the album goes. So I think that, like you were saying, it's focused, it's concise, you're getting different types of productions on here, and besides like maybe a little blemish here or there.
Twice is one of the worst beats of the year. That
Yeah.
song is so overly produced. You have random like crowd chanting, you have some dance
I like the part
pads.
2 of it though. The part 2 is all right.
Part 2 is a bit better, I guess.
Especially when it goes into like James Blake's refrain towards the end of it. But like you said, like Woo and Twice kind of weighed down the production just a tad. Overall, though, I still think it was great production, though.
Yeah.
Like you were saying, you have standouts on here like In Gray, Midnight, Bad Cameo, Missing Men, Run Away from the Rabbit. So overall, I think it was a great. I think it was a great sort of like area for the album, and it's gonna get a great score.
And again, super experimental. Even a
Sure.
beat like Red Carpet, you're getting like the psychedelic gospel sound with those organs and synths clashing. Like, just
It was creative.
a lot of creative beats for sure. But all right, replay value. I mean, my biggest issue with this album, after listening to it multiple times, is pacing issues. I feel like they did make certain instrumentals ride out for maybe too long. I also felt like some hooks maybe lasted longer than they needed to. Apart from that, I think it's definitely an interesting experience to check out once, twice, 3 times. But is it something that is really gonna, be in regular rotation for me? Not really. And to be honest with you, like, besides a couple of tracks and moments like James Blake's beautiful outro on Midnight, there's not many moments that blew my socks off and made me really like, be amazed by what I was hearing. So.
Well, that's it. There's maybe a lack of memorable moments within the track
Yeah.
list that I feel like are maybe going to push me away from it. And just looking as far as like what I have as keeps off of this album, In Gray, Midnight, Bad Cameo, Missing Man, and Run Away from the Rabbit, and then after that, Transport Me is maybe another one. So, I mean, it is a positive record. There's maybe 3 or 4 songs that I won't be revisiting that much. But then again, I do enjoy the totality of the album. I feel like it's gonna be a nice album to be able to maybe just create a nice ambiance in your crib. Like maybe if you want some good background music. I know you look at me and you say like, oh well, that doesn't mean any fuck it. Like that's like elevator music, you know. But there's certain albums that do well when you're able to just kind of start them and then after that finish them, and you don't really have to pay any attention to it. You know, you kind of just get lost in the production and you just enjoy the track sequencing. That was another thing I liked about the album was the track sequencing too.
I felt like there was no track sequencing at all, though.
I just
when
like I
was
like
listening to it,
certain
I'm like, there's no beats that bleed into each other. Like,
but I wasn't looking for that. I just like certain runs of songs. So for example, I like Save the Savior in Grade Midnight. I like that little track run right there. I like Bad Cameo and Missing Man right there. Then I like Transport Me, Run Away from the Rabbit, and Red Carpet. So there's certain sections of the album that I'm going to be revisiting in like succession and then maybe skipping over other ones. But the replay value is good. I mean, I'm definitely going to be revisiting it. I think it's, you know, a good effort from Yachty, but overall, like, it's nothing too crazy.
yeah, good rating. I'm not gonna be playing it too much, but it was definitely fun to check out for what it was and to see how those two worlds met. But to go into the overall thoughts, I think that it was cool to see them experiment the way that they did and to see them fuse so many genres from alternative R&B to dream pop to ambient soul music to hip hop. And I feel like there was definitely a big scope for this album, and there's definitely, you know, more hits than misses overall. I think that Yachty's performances do bring down certain tracks. I feel like I wanted the track list to maybe be a bit more unpredictable than it was. Like, you are getting what you expect to get after listening from one track to the next. You know, you're going to get slow burning instrumentals. You know, you're going to get these dramatic James Blake vocal lines and Yachty using similar vocal effects. I feel like the only unpredictable aspect of the album for me was truly the song structure and how much that was sort of like played with song after song and how sort of disjointed all of that was. So I guess that was cool ultimately, but the production was the massive highlight for me. So ultimately, I'm feeling a good rating with this.
I think it's a good album, and I agree with you. I feel like maybe there was room for more, but at the end of the day, I still got a good project out of it. And if this was maybe a solo James Blake album, maybe it would have came out a tad better, and it probably would have elevated to a different area. There's certain instances in Yachty's performances where I'm not a big fan, but at the same time, I feel like he still kind of held his own, and it's not necessarily James Blake featuring Yachty. This did feel like a collaboration album, and he does have good runtime on it. And I'm excited for maybe what's coming next for James Blake. That's what I feel like is the biggest emotion for me coming out of this new studio album experience. I want to see what he's going to come out with next as far as just only solo material. I also find it a nice accomplishment that they were able to handle the production with them too, with the help, of course, of someone like a Sad Pony and like a Benny X. But overall, I think it was a good listen. So, guys, let us know how you feel about the album in the comments section. You know, where did we get it right? Where did we get it wrong? And which album should we review next? Thank you so much for watching this review, and we'll catch you in the next one. Peace.